So the talk today is in three parts, kind of stealing the stylistic take on that John did yesterday. I'll do some slides, I'll do some demos, and then I'll do kind of a second set of demos. The middle set of demos is actually kind of software stuff. The third one is more kind of the way I would like to see the future, the way the world should be, kind of some movie demos of that. So, like Chris said, I'm Jason Huggins. I work at Sauce Labs, and Selenium's is an open source testing tool. Its website is seleniumhq.org, and then I registered this other domain. It's forwards to my company's address, p13y.com. So I'll try to not make this a sleazy sales pitch, but there will be some subliminal advertising. So first of all, why would someone ever use Selenium? Well, the first thing is the browser wars are back. When Selenium was actually created, IE had 95% of the market share of sorts, but the cranky developers that I worked with that were in that 5%, they were using Mozilla, and I needed to test in both browsers. And now that IE does not have 95% of the market, all these browsers keep on coming. So that's good. It's a complicated problem to solve, as John Ressig pointed out yesterday. So Selenium is a robot library that will act as a user would. Going through a website, you would open a browser, a link, type text to a field, click buttons, things like that. So the mission for Selenium is anything that a user can do, Selenium should be able to do. And specifically, it's how it's kind of risen above all the other functional testing tools in the market is that it's really good for Ajax-y kind of apps. This is kind of the canonical, very simple Ajax app that Google suggests, where as you're typing your search string, it's doing Ajax requests behind the scenes, and you can emulate the tapping of the down arrow to select a particular value. The other thing that Selenium is good for, but just functional testing tools in general, is end-to-end workflows. So this is a screenshot of Google Docs. So let's say you've got a workflow where you want to create a document, then you want to click on the sharing tab, then you want to share it with two of your friends, let's say Larry and Sergey, and then you want to click on invite collaborators. And just that general workflow, you want to make sure that works in all the browsers. And generally, you would call these kinds of things large tests. When you are talking to the network, you're talking to the database, you're obviously launching the browser. It's everything end to end. That's what a functional testing tool is for, and that's what Selenium is for. So what we try to do with the Selenium project, it's kind of ambitious, but we want to be able to test any browser on any platform. And with the other caveat is that we want to be able to make it so you can drive it from any programming language. So regardless of the web framework that you're doing on the server side. So we support Perl, Python, Ruby, Java, C#, and then other members, that's officially, and then members of the community have committed client libraries and lots of other languages. So yeah, you're supposed to keep it simple, but we have lots of simple parts, and it's become this big thing. So Selenium, also, it's downloads to date, cumulative to life. Although the project probably came out in 2004. I think we really started tracking this stuff in 2006, I guess. So we've got, even though quantity does not guarantee quality, the quantity actually is pretty good. We have over 1.5 million downloads life to date, and so the bottom line is monthly totals, and then the big line is cumulative. And if you look at the other tools that are kind of in competition with Selenium, Selenium is one, if I could be not so humble for a second. This also, we did reverse DNS lookups on that download traffic, and this is just a representative of the companies that have at least 100 downloads, and and also this does not count the people who just check out the code. This is actually downloading the binaries at night. So now I've proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt that Selenium is awesome. Why would you not use Selenium? Well, first of all, functional testing in general is slow by nature. Subliminal advertising, that's what my startup is specifically focused on solving, is the speed issue. But compared to the better thing to do if you're a developer is to write lots of fast, tight, small unit tests that don't touch the database, don't touch the network, don't touch the GUI, just in isolation. So it's better to do small unit tests. But when you have to use Selenium, but knowing that Selenium is in functional testing in general is slow. Also, because Selenium originally just started out as a JavaScript library, and everyone has this problem as a JavaScript developer, you can't touch all the black box widgets that are in the web page, the Flash and applet, Flash and Java applets, and now Silverlight, also the Adobe Reader, all those things, unless there's a JavaScript bridge to talk to those widgets from JavaScript, then you can do it if there's a bridge. But if not, Selenium can't do it. That confuses some people when you think like, oh, well, a user should be able to click into the YouTube player and click play. Why can't Selenium? Well, you have to know that it was implemented in JavaScript, and so it's limited to that. Also, as we all know, JavaScript lives in a security sandbox, and it feels like that sandbox was pretty big when Selenium was created 5 years ago, but it's getting smaller and smaller. You have things like mashups, where you've got data coming from two different sites, and you have things like iGoogle or Facebook, where you just have lots of different data coming from lots of different domains. And what doesn't trip up a user, one other example is a specific instance of this is the same origin policy. Your JavaScript is not allowed to go to any other site, and that's just not how people are doing apps these days. And again, from a point of view of a functional testing tool, a user can go from site to site. The testing tool should too. So, but we constantly come up into the boundaries of the sandbox when it comes to testing. So obviously Selenium is not for small tests, it's for big tests. So a brief history of Selenium. This is kind of the untold story. So I'll just kind of fly through these things. So originally started when I was at ThoughtWorks 5 years ago. I was in charge of writing an in-house replacement for our time and expense system. So if you can look right kind of at the bottom here, like there's a couple of buttons. They're kind of fuzzy. But this was Ajax before it was Ajax. I just call it fast JavaScript or fast apps, in the sense where if you've got a 5-line expense report, you want to add one row because you have lots of expenses. Instead of making what was state of the art at the time, a request response, I just would clone the last row, blank out the lines, and add a new one, increment the counter. And this was awesome. I didn't think to come up with an acronym for these things, but what we did notice, though, is because we did have a user base using Mozilla and IE, what was happening is we would check in that feature, and every other week it would be working in one of those browsers. And so we would launch the bug, or open a bug, it's broken in IE, we'd fix it in IE, of course it would be broken in Mozilla. It's very frustrating. But I did not want to go back to the days of request response, so I wanted to keep this fast functionality, fast JavaScript, but had to figure a way to test it. So we would go on and on, like, have to keep this feature. We had several failed attempts at basically Selenium is like the 5th thing that we tried, or 4th or 5th. The first thing we tried was JWebUnit. First problem is that we were a Python project and we're trying to use a Java technology, so that's right off the bat silly and stupid. But the other thing was, at the time for functional testing, the state of the art was something like JWebUnit, where it was an HTTP protocol driver, where you would do like regex assertions on the HTTP text traffic going over the wire. And everyone and especially since you were doing request response anyway, everything that you needed to know was supposed to be on the wire, right? It's all this text. But because I had browser-specific bugs, just looking at the HTTP traffic was pointless. So that was quickly abandoned. The second thing we tried was something called Driftwood. A coworker of mine, Andrew McCormick, he's in Chicago. I was in Chicago too at the time. Anyway, so he created this prototype, and it was Mozilla specific. So it didn't help us for solving the IE problems. But it did kind of at least prove the point that you could drive the browser from inside the browser and using JavaScript. So that was pretty cool. The third thing we tried was a project that was around for maybe about a year at that point. It was JSUnit. That is written by Edward Hyatt. I think he's at Pivotal Labs in California. And the thing that didn't work with this is that JSUnit is meant for unit testing. I kind of needed something functional testing. But specifically that was wrong with it is I needed to be able to see the user interface and see all the widgets being exercised. But the other kind of very specific thing that it could not do that everyone knows that Selenium, JavaScript is load and go. The second that script gets loaded from the server, it executes, right? But with a workflow, you have to do everything kind of asynchronously, where you have to load a page and then kind of hang out for a while. Stop, wait till the page is loaded, then continue. And that asynchronous kind of callback scheme was just not supported by JS Unit. So we tried to shoehorn it in there and just couldn't make it work. So another attempt, I really said, like, man, I really need a functional testing tool or something with the emphasis on actually seeing what the browsers are doing. And so Ward Cunningham around that time, created this framework called FIT. I think FIT is, the acronym is Framework for Integrated Testing. He's also the creator of Wiki and lots of other things. But so he created this thing called FIT, and it was implemented in lots of different languages, but there was nothing for the JavaScript platform, if you will, at the time. So I kind of emailed him and said, hey, did anyone done this yet? He said, no, go ahead. So I tried to implement it. And he had a specific thing. If you know Fit, I'm not going to go into it, but they've got these things called fixtures, and it's good for data-driven development. But one of the things they had was this thing called action fixture. And they've got he has four API commands. I don't know if I can zoom in here so you can see this. You've got start, enter, press, and click. And he says on his website, if you deviate from this API, you forked the project, and you no longer can call yourself Fit. And also, it's like, okay. Also, the other thing is kind of silly. If I want to check a checkbox, that's not the command you would want to use. That actually is is the command for verifying a field. But that doesn't make any sense. And I'm going to check a checkbox, but then check the value, and too much naming clashing. So I didn't like the API. It was too limiting. So he kind of, I guess, said at the time, go fork yourself. He was a very pleasant guy. He didn't actually say those words, but we were forced to fork Fit. And so out of all the things that we learned, originally it was JSFT, and then we kind of rebranded it to be Selenium. So, on that side note, what's with the name Selenium? Well, the company Mercury Interactive, they were acquired by HP last year. They're like the 400-pound gorilla in the testing and the corporate evil proprietary testing tools market. And so I was just playing around, was Googling around for play on words with mercury poisoning, antidote for mercury poisoning, found this kind of quack doctor who's talks about like removing mercury amalgam dental fillings, and how selenium supplements can be a cure for mercury poisoning. So like, aha, that's it. So now that I've said this out loud, it used to be the inside joke of the project, and now it's live for the world to know that we're specifically mooning the ogre of Mercury Interactive. So now I'll briefly kind of fly through the projects that are kind of in the Selenium family. It originally started with this JavaScript. Oh, sorry. First of all, are there any questions? Kind of flying through. All right, I'll go faster. The first thing Selenium started out as is just a JavaScript library. And if you've seen Selenium, it kind of looks like this, where you can recognize the inspiration from Fit, where forget all of the left side and the right side, just focus on the center. Whoa. See if I can, wrong button here. There you go. The center, you've got the 3-column field where the first column is the command, the second column is kind of like the field that you want to do something to, and the third thing is like the variable. So this line right here would be, I would want to type the letter X into the username field. It's kind of lifted straight from Fit. And then the web app that you're testing will load in an iframe down below. So when you click the play button, it will be kind of a player piano where it's actually kind of, it will show each line. Yeah, here you can't really see it, but as each line gets passed, it'll go from gray to green, and if that test line failed, it'll go red. So it was very visually interesting, and finally got what I wanted, and it worked cross-browser. About 2 years on, Shinya in Tokyo. He's also this creator of the Pocket Guitar iPhone app. It's like number 7 on the all-time top iPhone app things. But he also, before he was famous on the iPhone stuff, he created Selenium IDE, which is effectively Selenium core but pulled out as a browser extension for Firefox. And the cool thing about this is it is no longer susceptible to the security sandbox. So you can go from site to site and go to SSL protected websites. And it's pretty cool. It also has a record playback feature. So if you want to test that scenario, going to google.com, testing some values, it can record this for you. The other cool thing about this is that in the options menu, you can select to translate the source of the test that you just recorded to Java or any of the languages that we support. I hate Java, so I would port it to Python, and then we can use that, drive that from the next tool that we have. It's something called Selenium Remote Control. If you find a lot of people who hate Selenium, they probably specifically hate Selenium Remote Control. The IDE has a lot of fans, but remote control is kind of this hairy beast. So imagine that robot that I showed you at the beginning. This is the remote control for that. I guess think like Osimo, I guess. And in the like what Selenium server is, Selenium Remote Control, it's the server that sits in the middle between your application code, your Perl, Python, Ruby, whatever code, and your browsers on one side, or actually doing it that way. And it will proxy all the commands for you. It also handle starting the browsers, stopping them. If the Windmill guys looked at this, and they kind of felt like Selenium Server was just too much code, and they felt arm's distance from the browsers. So one of the things they did with Windmill is got rid of this Selenium Server thing and just went straight from Python to the browsers. Lots of other competitors to Selenium, if you will, kind of skip that middleman and just do straight language to straight browser, like the Water project, web application testing in Ruby. They now have Firefox support. For a long time, it was just the Ruby and IE show. And so that's what you'd see a lot is the common thing. Selenium puts this thing in the middle, but that gives us the ability to do all languages and all browsers. And the last part of the Selenium family is something called Selenium Grid. And that, I won't really go too much into the specifics of this. It's kind of an advanced use, but also kind of very applicable to my startup. But the very simple quiz is, what is faster, doing 4 things serially on one machine or doing 4 things in parallel on 4 machines? So obviously, this is faster. And Selenium Grid is the open source component of Selenium to do that. You still have to do some configuration on your machines, but the capability is there. And then the shameless plug is my startup does a Selenium Grid-like thing on the cloud in EC2. So if I can get out of this application, I can, let's see, there we go. Okay, so that's the slide component. I'll show you some things that will, to the title of my talk, will drive you bonkers when you do functional testing. One specific example is alerts. Alert, confirm, prompts, Firefox 3. The stupid self-signed certificate prompt where you have to click 20 times to actually let you accept that certificate. There's other things like basic authentication prompts, all these kind of pop-ups. The problem with those is that once that pop-up goes up to the screen, again because of that security sandbox, JavaScript can't click on the OK button. Once it's there, a human or some kind of native operating system code actually has to click on that OK. Selenium projects, to date, we fake it out by overriding the alert, all the things that we can. When you call to alert, it's actually a function called window.alert, and we replace that with our own code that it just says return true, and maybe we put it in a log hash of alerts that have been accumulated, so you can do assertions on that. But it's just a hack that's worked for a couple of years, but it's getting harder. What Selenium specifically does is when it loads the page, it injects that hack into all the stuff that you did. But when you have lots of dynamic pages, lots of crazy widgets on the screen, we can't be everywhere all the time hacking all the pages that come in, and so occasionally little alerts fly up. And when that alert comes up, the combination problem of the JavaScript thread itself is frozen at that point, which is a nice debugging trick, but if you have a code execution running in the browser, you can't even call back to the server saying I'm stuck, because you really are stuck. So the one thing I wanted to show you, there's a snippet of code that, at least in Firefox, can guarantee any pop-up that comes up, it will actually, it can show it and then click on it. And this is done in JavaScript. But the key of this is that it's actually run kind of as a browser extension. So that in browser extension land, you have a second execution thread. So even if the primary thing where the alert comes up is stuck, your extensions have a second thread that actually can kind of go fix the problem. So Aaron Boudman, he is at Google. He wrote Grease Monkey, and he's also on the Gears team. He gave me a snippet of code, and I can't, it'll be too boring for me to go through all of this, but I'll just briefly kind of do the code summary. So Firefox specifically is it's a wonderful browser to test because infinitely anything is configurable, but it's also its own little operating system. So what is easy for Safari, it's just you use you Apple events and you just do all kinds of just sane stuff you do in any application on the Apple side. In IE and Windows, you can use Windows automation and all kinds of stuff. But Firefox is its own thing, so you always have to come up with some crazy thing. So he has this crazy bit of code that lets me listen to Firefox's internal eventing system, which is kind of a superset of all the events that just plain old JavaScript protected or security protected JavaScript can get to. Specifically, there's an event called DOM window opened that I can hook to. And if I can make this a little bit bigger. The magic is I can, see if I can find the right one here. Magic is this line of code. I can set a timeout. I don't think I have that version running on the machine, but if you can see it, maybe not for the video. But I can catch it, and then in a timeout, close it. So if my Selenium test is actually running, this snippet of code is kind of like running as like a watchdog and actually can catch it. So the brief demo of this is I've got, let's see, I've got Firebug running. And I could do the before and after, but in the interest of time, I'll just show you the after. And hopefully no demo gremlins show up. But this is something that's been previously impossible to handle in Selenium. So you see the alert comes down, and then my timer kind of kicks in and gets it to go away. So the future of the project is going down this path of finding either browser extensions or actually native operating system code to get out of that security sandbox and do things to the browser.
Browsers support for the alert?
This is specifically a Firefox hack. For IE, I'll have to do something similar. I created, it's open on code.google.com, something called Selenium Ice. It's a Hello World browser extension. It's also really hard to Google for information on how to write browser extensions for IE. So that it's just kind of like if you wanted to write browser extensions in general for IE, go check out Selenium Ice. But you want to be able to inject yourself into the, as IE is about to show an alert to the screen, you want to get your meaty hooks into it so you can get a reference to that and then close it in a second. So Selenium Ice was kind of my first attempt at doing that. One of the other things you have to do in protected, in browser extension land is stuff like the file upload fields. It's the same kind of thing. You have to use kind of a browser extension to do that. Yeah, so that's like the extension itself is written in C#, but also you can do it through Microsoft Automation library stuff. That's kind of external, but really you need a browser extension to right when the alert pops up. So that's the frustrating, the good thing and bad thing about the Selenium project. We did kind of the worse is better approach. We solved about 80% of the problem by doing everything in JavaScript, but now we're 5 years in. The only thing left for us to do is that 20%, and we have to architecturally, do something different. So on that note, it's not just a pie in the sky rewrite that'll take forever. There's a project that already exists called WebDriver that actually does implement the things the way you should do with these browser extensions or just native operating system hooks. And Selenium 2.0, and over the next year, we'll be merging with them. So we'll have that capability forward. WebDriver, that's also hosted at code.google.com. So that's kind of one example of being able to get rid of these alerts. That's been kind of driving me crazy. And also, I think John, I think he might be, is he here? Or I think he's in the other room. I think he noted that, yeah, test swarm, if you throw an alert there, it might kill that session. So it plagues every automation tester. So that's now gotten to go away. The other thing that people complain about Selenium is the syntax of those tables. I have some, I guess, some incongruity in the sense that I hate XML, yet I supported, responsible for those Selenium test tables where you've got, it's ugly to hack code inside HTML tables or XML. It's the same thing. So what people would love to do is be able to write their tests as just plain old JavaScript. And like I said before, it's tricky because JavaScript by itself is just load and go. And I need this asynchronous way to do it. And what I wanted to briefly touch on today is there's two ways that you can kind of hack supporting plain old JavaScript as your tests. And knowing that you have to kind of do this continuation engine of sorts of like do one line of code, then hang out, wait to be called back, and then restart again. So one thing I found is this, this library called Narcissus, written by Brendan Eich at Mozilla, who created JavaScript. He was prototyping the next version of JavaScript, JavaScript 2, I guess, which is ECMAScript 4. And the cool thing he did is he wrote a compiler parser in JavaScript, so you could play with two features, but it compiles down and runs in JavaScript 1.5. So it's similar in that sense to Objective-J, where you're kind of writing a parser, and you have the same kind of issues of you can now run through your code the way we want it, but debugging is a little bit trickier. But I did kind of jack this into Selenium to see if I could get it to work. And so I kind of have three tests. Of course, as a testing tool, I have to have tests for everything before I do it. Sorry for the resolution here. See if I can make this bigger. So I'll just run. So the brief test is creating functions, testing if-then loop, if-then else, and also doing a loop as well. So let's see if I can reload this page. What it does is it parses it, and actually, let's see if I can just run it. Let's walk through it. I don't know if you can see it at the bottom. I'm kind of faking out a read eval print loop here by actually opening a page and setting the iframe down here to a new page, but with a text message as its variable. If I do if then else, you can kind of look that it's going to create a variable. If things are true, we'll put hello world. Sorry for the small text. And the next one shows some more text. Hold on a second. See if I can run this. So one of the interesting things about this is this parser that's implemented in JavaScript. You probably can't tell it so much at the bottom, but this is the live stack. And when people talk about stack-based languages or register-based languages, this effectively you're compiling JavaScript down to JavaScript itself, but you're creating this data structure, and because these Selenium tables are executing the threads, I already have all this other smarts to do these things. I'm compiling down JavaScript to these little tables. You actually can see the stack be animated, and as it evaluates a particular command, you can see it commands being inserted into the stack. Let's see, actually, a better example is the formatted, the do loops. So as it gets to a new loop, it's injecting new stuff. All the stuff at the bottom is the remaining end of the stack, but it's smart enough to inject into that loop right in the middle. So this has actually been interesting to kind of just understand how interpreters work, how it adds things to the stack. All right. And there's one other thing that I thought was interesting about this, is that if I change one, let's see. So if I look at this source code, it parsed the test. If I go and change, see if I can get to the source code here. Where's the window? I'm going to uncomment this code here. go back to that screen, if I can find my browser window. If I reload it, of course it's not going to work. Yeah, so I reloaded it, and now you're looking at a printed representation of the abstract syntax tree. And this is crazy. Like, we're doing it all in JavaScript land. And so usually, if you want to understand how an interpreter works, you have to go down to the C code to figure out how things are implemented. But because Narcissus is meta-circular interpreter, you can kind of stay all in JavaScript land and actually mess around with things. So specifically, like, to make sense of this, if we look at the first test, of course I have to go undo the, hold on a second. Let's bring back the source control. The first line was setting a variable called URL to just a string. But if I look at the syntax tree, there it is. I'm setting a variable. The name of the variable is URL, and I'm setting it to the string here. Sorry about that. Setting it to this value. So it's a really great way, just if you're mucking around with wanting to implement your own language. Narcissus actually is a pretty, at least for me, it was not being a language creator, it was a way to understand this stuff. So if anything, the takeaway from this is go muck around with Narcissus. Now there's a couple of projects that have taken Narcissus and actually fixed a lot of bugs in it. So there's something called Narrative.js and another thing called Strands. Those are two other projects that have needed to add asynchronous callbacks, or making it easier to do that stuff in JavaScript. So if we really put this into Selenium, we'll probably not use Narcissus directly. We'll probably use Narrative.js or Strands. And so those are the two kind of geeky demos that I want to show you. How much time? 5? 5. All right. So I'll leave you on this is my kind of a soapbox rant for how I want the future to be. I want to show you a demo. The one thing, if you go back in time to that magical year between when the iPhone was just vaporware, and all we had were these videos on apple.com. And I look at this and this is test automation. This is a functional test of their product. And the amazing thing is about Apple is this isn't just some geeky thing that a QA engineer does. These are freaking commercials. But I look at this this is what I want the people when they think of tests is to not write something with a really boring report that goes to your QA manager. You should be thinking in terms of kind of like a Hollywood screenwriter. You should be writing screenplays that show off how awesome your application is. I mean, Apple, that's all they do is just show their app. And this is kind of what a functional testing tool should do. Open something and exercise the application and show it off. So what I'm trying to do with Selenium, I call it the Hollywood feature set. Slowing it down, animating the mouse, maybe doing text-to-speech narration, all kinds of things. So I look at iPhone videos as kind of the gold standard for what I want to do. There are some actual code, bringing that back to reality. This is a project called Castanaut. And this is a automated screencast. He does text-to-speech, is recorded on a Mac, and he's showing off his application. So this is like a CMS. He's using mouse pose is the thing that makes it highlighting, and it's this Ruby library.
We should add a few more to create a simple site structure.
I mean, this is pretty sick, because if you do this automated, instead of screencasting...
Established by dragging and dropping.
I'll let it finish.
Blueprint has many types of pages.
Okay, I'm running out of time here, so...
It's a blog.
It's a blog, right. So this is a library. You can go Google it. Castanaut is the library. And the thing is, from a test automation point of view, it's ghetto. It's 1970s bad, old way to not do testing. There's hard-coded values, go to this absolute screen coordinate. Terrible. So from a Hollywood screenwriting point of view, A+, or maybe A-. iPhone gets the A+. But from test automation point of view, they get an F because they just do it wrong. But if you can get some kind of test automation tool combined with the screencasting Hollywood feature set smarts, you got something. I think. And one other thing is to kind of put my money where my mouth is this is some of the stuff that I actually was trying to do, again, subliminal advertising. Before we had a user interface, we had an API. We were actually sitting very lightly on top of CouchDB. So if you want to upload a script to us and then run that script on our code, on our servers, first you create a script object in CouchDB, and then you'll create a job object. And what I did here is this is an automated screencast kind of taken from, I've got my stuff that I would otherwise type at the terminal or the interactive prompt, and instead of just running it silently behind the scenes and just giving a pass-fail, I'm actually slowing it down. I'm launching a terminal window. In this case, I'm using the Python dogtail library to drive everything and do it kind of slowly so I actually can see the results. And because it's also got testing hooks in there, if anything fails, I'll get that pass-fail at the end. But I also now could potentially post this on my website as, okay, you want to use our REST API? Well, this is how you would do it. And I'll use as my pass-fail for, whether this is useful, like I actually can show this to people, and if this isn't that interesting, I can kind of spice it up with some text-to-speech or some music or make it more iPhone commercial-ish. But this is kind of where I want the future to be, is like when you do functional testing, try to make it look like an iPhone commercial. And everything else, make it really boring, fast unit tests. But really try to aspire to do this. So I think I'm out of time, and that is my talk. Thanks.